Rumble. This is Michael Moore, and thank you for listening, all of you who've been listening to my new. I want to mention that the underwriter for today's episode is Anchor Podcast Platform. These are the free podcast people that will help you or anybody who wants to start a podcast. They'll get you going, and they'll put you on all the platforms from Spotify to Apple and Google, Stitcher, and they do it for free. They don't charge you a dime. I mean, this is all about the democratization of audio so that everybody can have a voice online like this. And they've supported me in getting my podcast started, and for that I'm grateful. I have a very special guest with me here today, obviously or certainly a cultural icon, somebody who has been entertaining us, although we'll get into the us in a few minutes, for 25 years, I would think. My guest is RuPaul, and thank you for being here.
Thank you. I was just down the street, so it was no problem.
All right. Yeah. So it was just, you were free and walking the neighborhood. And I
was walking the neighborhood. I walked through the park to get here, which is very nice. Always very. I watched that documentary, New York, a documentary film by Rick Burns.
Oh, right. Yes.
And it when you live in New York and you're around New York, having seen that documentary, you have such more love for New York. And walking through the park, all of the stories of how the Central Park came to be sort of pop up in your head, which is, have you seen that thing? It's so beautiful.
Yes, I have seen it.
Beautiful.
Yes. And Rick is Ken Burns' brother.
Okay.
So Ken is, I guess, the more well-known Burns.
Right.
And Ken's daughter made the Central Park 5 documentary.
Of course, yeah.
So, and his brother is Rick Burns, who made this incredible, you're right, documentary about New York. And, you and I are not from here. We grew up in other places. I think you, San Diego, maybe?
I'm from San Diego, born and raised in San Diego, and then I moved to Atlanta when I was 15.
Right. So, and I'm from Flint, Michigan. But New York always held this sort of, at least for me, maybe because my mom brought us kids here a lot, because her sister lived on Staten Island. She was also from the Flint area, but she married somebody from Staten Island, so moved here. So we got to come here as kids.
Wow, that's great.
It was really great, starting in third grade, and at least every other year we were brought here.
That is fabulous. That's what a great gift for kids. I think traveling is one of the greatest gifts you can give to your kids.
Yes.
Because it opens, it widens, it broadens their perspective on what this planet is, where we are, who people are, how they can fit into this world.
Yes, I certainly, when coming here, we would tell people that we would summer on Staten Island. It sounded like we were in, wow, there's a part of New York City that's an island. Yeah, well, yes. It's mostly islands, I think.
Very Rosh Hashanah.
Yes. but it really, it did open our eyes up to so much that we were never going to see in Flint or in Michigan or the Midwest even.
I mean, if you're going to have kids, I think you should probably think about what you freaking have to offer them,
Right.
My mother, French was her first language. Did she teach her children French? No, she did not.
Right.
But thankfully,
she was from Louisiana.
From Louisiana. Thankfully, I had two older sisters who were very, they were like a world to me. They were pop culture lovers, and I learned so much from them and from television. I didn't learn one thing from going to school. Not one thing.
I learned to type.
You learn how to type. That's a great thing.
It was good, and it was a very kind of brave thing to do, because back when I was in high school, typing class was for girls, and there were only 2 of us boys in the class, and so we would always be laughed at or mocked when we were going into the typing room.
That's because those other kids didn't summer on Staten Island.
That is correct. And in a weird thing, this story had always stuck with me too, that my dad was in the Marines in World War II in the South Pacific. And he always told us this story of one day they had so many casualties in their unit. The next day they were going back out, and the captain said, I need somebody to stay behind and type up the casualty list. It was so long, sadly. Do any of you know how to type? And my dad was the only one who knew how to type. And he raised his hand. He said, Moore, you're staying behind. They went out and most of them died that day.
Wow.
He didn't die because he could type.
Yeah.
That sort of weird story. I mean, not a weird story, but it was kind of like the juxtaposition of that stayed with me. So I signed up for typing. But you're right. In school, I'm trying to think what I had I had two good English teachers that let me write poetry and other things that, again, were not, encouraged.
Yeah. Well, I can remember a couple of teachers. In fact, one teacher, Bill Pinnell, who I'm still friends with now today, taught me, he said, don't take life too seriously. And I didn't really get it then, but I got it years later. And then I had another teacher right before I dropped out of high school in the 11th grade, who was a political science teacher. And she said all the things that I suspected on my own about how to deal with people, and that, the public is really generally not very smart. So politicians play this game with them where they tell them what makes them feel safe. But if the politicians actually told them the real truth of what's going on, people wouldn't know what to do with that information. And even today, I think, do they teach that same kind of political science in school? I mean, does everybody get that information? I think not.
No, it's worse now. Actually, I don't know what the current statistic is, but it was on its way to being half of the schools, high schools and middle schools, no longer teach civics. They've just eliminated it, as they have with many schools with art or music as classes. You do after school stuff, but the idea of civics is disappearing in the way that a class that we used to have to take called penmanship, where you had to learn writing, how to write cursive, and so that was that I think it's worse now. But I don't. When you said that people are generally not that bright, I don't think it's in our DNA to be stupid. There is something with our society. Maybe it starts with the schools. Maybe it already starts at home, but we're not encouraged to think critically.
Right. Unless you have to, unless you are forced to, unless it's a survival mechanism. Growing up the way I did, where I was just an outsider from the moment I came home from the hospital. I grew up with all sisters, and I was just always an outsider, and that's fine. It was great. It was great because I learned how to find a place for myself. I learned how to create a place for myself. Right. So critical thinking was a way for me to navigate my journey. I had to say, is that meant for me? Is that negativity meant for me? Or is it really a reflection of that person's own self-loathing? And usually that was the case. And that was how I had to use my own critical thinking. And also my family, my mother and father were at war from day one. So I had to figure out, I had to sort of hover above the situation, look at all the pieces like a chess game, and figure out, okay, what's my next move to survive all
So
of
basic
this.
survival required creating a sense of critical thinking or sussing up the situation to where, what is it? How am I going to survive this? How am I going to get through this? My parents
Absolutely.
are screaming at each other. I have no brothers. I have sisters. I feel different. Like, how young does that thought go back?
The first thought, the very first thought,
Wow.
it was never not there.
Right.
But, I think people, if they don't have to do that, if they can live in some type of a haze, some type of a fantasy world, then they won't go to look behind the curtain. I think there are two types of people in the world: the people who understand that this is a matrix, and the people who believe that the matrix is real. It's like being in a stage play, and all the actors on stage thinking that the character they're playing is really them. And very few people are able to go outside of their own character and go, oh, okay, I see what's happening here. I'm part of this tapestry, this role-playing storyline, and how can I elevate my character? How can I make my character something that has something to say, and that is brilliant and exciting? I don't think a lot of people don't want exciting, actually. A lot of people just want to just wake me when it's over. Wake me when it's over, you know?
Yeah, that's a very common feeling today. But how did you do that? How were you able to operate outside of the character, or the role that you were supposed to play in this society? Somewhere as a child, you started making decisions where you were like, okay, this is how the script is going to go.
Yeah. Well, early on, I realized that this was a matrix. And even just from like probably 5 years old, hearing about the Bible and hearing about, hearing that God says, I am the only God, but I'm also a jealous God. And as a kid, I was thinking, well, jealous of who if you're the only God? Right. And so there was a tear in the matrix right there. And I thought, wait a minute, that doesn't really make any sense. Jealous of who? So that led me to look closer at the tear in the matrix. And like Dorothy, when she gets to Oz, realizes, wait a minute, you're the wizard? And that's why that is my favorite movie of all time. But it's a way to remember that you can find truth and through critical thinking, and not have that truth wreck your experience. Because most people, I remember in my 20s, I dropped acid every weekend. That was my thing with all my friends. And the friends who would freak out on acid, we'd like 4 or 5 hits at a time. The people who would freak out were the ones who hadn't gotten to the place where they understood the matrix. Because once you drop acid, the matrix makes itself very clear to you. And the people who would freak out, and by freak out, I don't know if people are familiar with that, but some people have a panic attack when they start hallucinating. I never had a panic attack because it actually affirmed everything that I thought the matrix was. It was like, oh, of course, none of this is real. This is all a make-believe.
Right.
And so most people don't go there, whether they're hallucinating or not. They won't go there because they're afraid of seeing the matrix for what it is, and then in turn having to deconstruct and recreate a belief system of their own making.
So what were the other tears for you, especially as a child? First, let's say the first tear was realizing that this thing that's been called a god doesn't really doesn't match up to what they're saying.
Yeah.
And there's that tear. What were the next tears?
The tears, the second big one
in the Matrix
was boys go here, girls do this, blacks over here, whites over there, this religion there, this separation. And which as time went on, I realized that separation was a byproduct of ego thinking. The ego wants to put things in boxes so so it can understand it or feel safe, and this false sense of security. So the big one, people would say, "Are you a girl?" So I guess I looked like a girl when I was a kid, or I acted effeminate, or whatever the case was. And I realized, no, and it was obvious that I wasn't really, but that was one of the big ones where I realized, wait a minute, we are not that different from one another. We're actually more alike than we are different, and that is a byproduct of ego thinking. So that was another big one. And then, I love colors and textures and laughing and different eclectic things. And society would say, oh no, you can only do this and you can do that. And I knew that wasn't true. So,
you're to color that with this crayon.
Exactly.
Within these lines.
And all the things I was attracted to in art affirmed my suspicion that these boundaries actually don't exist. Only in society, only in small-minded people do they exist. So my first order of business would be find my tribe. in 71, or maybe it was 70, I think it was 71, I saw Monty Python on public television, on PBS. And it was more affirmation that my tribe existed. I just have to go and find them. And I suspected that even then, that I'd have to go to New York to find them. Not necessarily Monty Python, but people who thought outside the box and who were irreverent. I grew up watching the Carol Burnett show with the spoofs of those movies that she would do.
Right.
And I was always attracted to things that made fun of the Matrix, that made fun of all the rules. David Bowie came into my consciousness in 73. And, I always loved, Cher from Sonny and Cher, because she was very punk rock and very, she didn't act like girls were supposed to act.
Right. She didn't look like it. She didn't act like it. And she had you're right, a sort of a sarcastic, sardonic sense of saying this is all bullshit, basically.
Yes. In her attitude. She didn't even have to say that.
No, she didn't say it.
It was in her
there.
attitude. Yeah.
So this is very true. And what is this about society where so many people are raised to actually not be curious,
right? To
not want to figure it out or to think because again, I don't think people are inherently stupid. I think that the way ignorance is enforced, it's kind of an enforced ignorance where it's not encouraged. It's almost looked down upon if you want to educate yourself to learn that statistic that where more than half of the American public cannot name their 2 U.S. senators from their state. So right away, you don't even know, who's calling the shots for you.
Right.
Ask anybody, including me, who is the chairman, who is the head of ExxonMobil or, General Motors or IBM or any of this. We know the star ones, like the head of Apple or Amazon or whatever, but we don't even know who runs the banks.
Right.
Seriously, name you follow the news and politics, and I do. Name the head of Chase Manhattan, or I think it's called J.P. Morgan. See, I can't even name them.
I don't know. I don't know anymore.
Yeah, we don't know any of these people. When I was growing up, you kind of knew them. You knew that that Rockefeller was the head of that.
David Rockefeller was head of Chase Manhattan.
Yes, you knew that, and we've gotten away from just the basic knowledge of just the everyday things, and I think that has benefited the Matrix for
absolutely. There's a reason we don't know their names, and there's a reason that people gravitate toward fear rather than toward love. And fear is a very powerful tool when it comes to controlling people. And the main reason people don't gravitate toward educating themselves is because it would mean they'd have all of their whole fantasy world would fall like dominoes, and they'd have to build it up again. And that sort of crucifixion and resurrection, which happens throughout nature all the time, is what we are afraid of, because it would mean that a lot of the things that you've based your whole life on, your Social Security, your pension, your wife, your family, what you think of as security, would just disappear, and you'd have to create a new sense of security for yourself. And that's hard to do. It's hard to do. And, if a 5-year-old started asking about, wait a minute, what God is jealous of who? If you're the only God, who are you? If a 5-year-old starts asking those questions, where do you go from there?
Right.
Well, you start to look. The answers are there.
Right.
It's just you have to work. You have to put some work in.
Did you ask a lot of questions?
I asked a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And
when did you realize that you were putting yourself in danger by asking a lot of questions?
I don't feel that it was dangerous. I felt it was my only choice. I felt the other option was dangerous, of staying ignorant and sort of following, don't ask any questions of that man behind the curtain. That was more dangerous because I knew I had something. I knew that I could see colors and hear sounds and see things that other people couldn't see.
And you weren't afraid of discovering some of the answers were pretty cruel and might make this world less safe because now you know?
No, I wasn't afraid of it. You know, my mother, she was very world weary. I don't know what happened to her before I met her, but something did happen to her. And she was always world weary. She was always skeptical of the world. And even though she read the Bible constantly and was religious, she was always against organized religion. You know, she's that person. So I grew up with a skeptical perspective on the world because of my mother. But my mother is also the one that said, you know, unless they're paying your bills, pay them these, no mine. So the gumption to go out and do my own thing really does come from her, and she supported that 100%.
Wow, you were very lucky.
Very lucky.
Yeah. Is she still with us?
No, she left for Paris probably I think in '93, right as I was getting famous. She moved on, but she when she was pregnant with me, saw a psychic. Psychic said, "Oh, you're having a boy." It's before ultrasound, and he's going to be famous.
Wow.
So I grew up with this idea. I don't know if because the seed was planted there, I became famous, or because the psychic actually predicted it. But it doesn't matter. I knew that I was here and I was going to do something.
So you become famous, not in the at that time certainly the normal way to be famous. You create your own path.
Absolutely.
And you invent a path essentially. Yeah. You know, you obviously became the most, and still are the most famous drag queen, but there were drag queens before you, but there was something that happened when you began, and certainly in the 90s, and then as we entered this century, you had somehow, I don't know how to put this, you turned a light on in a darkness, and the fear, we'll say, of amongst non-gay people,
right,
started to dissipate.
Yeah.
In some ways, and inch by inch, bit by bit, the fear, which of course fear is the basis of anger and hatred and bigotry and all of this, it starts to fade away.
People really aren't that complicated. They really aren't. They're pretty simple. And with drag, which had always been subversive, and it scares people because it's saying that this image that you've taken on, this role that you've taken on, is a hoax. And look, okay, snap my finger. Now I'm a female. Now I'm a male. Now I'm dressed as a cowboy. Boop, snap my fingers. Now I'm dressed as a military man. And especially when it comes to sexuality, switching identities like that so quickly and so effortlessly scares the bejesus out of people, because it's their own way of seeing that there is a crack in the matrix. It's their own way of somehow recognizing that, you mean we aren't different from one another, and that the role I'm playing is a hoax? So that's one aspect of it. But the bigger, another aspect of it, which allowed me to make this work for me in show business, is that in my persona, I decided I would construct a persona that was non-threatening. I'd put one part Cher, one part Dolly Parton, one part David Bowie, and 2 parts Diana Ross, mix it all together.
What's not to like?
What's not to like? And in doing so, also extracting the sexuality out of it. And that was the major element that allowed me to be invited into Betty and Joe Beercan's home through television, because I am non-threatening. So those were the elements. And it's just like, you know, if you study humans and you see what they do and what their fears are, then you can manipulate them. That's what the power brokers have done for years, the people who create religions and fears and all that stuff. They have played on the fears of people And that has allowed them to control the narrative.
Right. And you, as an artist, as all great artists throughout history have known, that manipulation can also go the other way. Instead
Yes.
of out of fear and, trying to push those buttons of hate and all that, it can be created out of love.
Yes.
And compassion and empathy and a whole bunch of things. But it's interesting, you say by extracting the sexuality out of these characters that you would perform, that would be the thing that would be the most threatening. That if they thought that there was, if you were trying to bring them along into some sort of sexual adventure, that was like a bridge too far.
Yeah.
And so once they realized, oh, he's just funny, and he can sing. He's very entertaining. Seems like a nice guy. I'm not going to deal with the fact of whether he's a guy or not right now.
Right.
I'm just gonna. I'm gonna go with this simply because it's entertaining, and also in the generation before us, our parents' generation were hugely entertained by Milton Berle and men who dressed as women, mostly for comedic purposes, mostly often, I should say, to put down women. But it was not a new idea. And when you look back at those shows now, the TV shows from the 50s, you think, wow, how were people handling this? Just fine, it seems.
Yeah.
But when you came along, you weren't doing it with this wink, wink. Don't worry, folks, I'm not really.
Right.
It's like, no, we kind of know. We knew that you were what you were and what you were doing, and yet somehow you kicked open this door, and the mainstream television put you on. I don't remember exactly when your talk show was on VH1.
It was in 96.
96. I mean, this is still pretty early.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because Bugs Bunny was my first recollection of drag in a punk rock sense. He wasn't misogynistic. He was actually making fun of these identities that we adopt as people in the way that today's drag does that. It wasn't like the Milton Berle thing. Bugs Bunny was making fun of everyone. And I go back to what my teacher taught me in the 10th grade, which is don't take life too seriously. And that is the role of the drag queen throughout history. Before they were called drag queens, they were shaman or witch doctors or, people, court jesters. They are there to remind people that don't take any of this too seriously. This is all temporary. This body, this building, you are who you think you are. It's all temporary. And that's our role. Some people get it. Most people don't get it. And I have carried that with me. And I've also understood why it threatens a lot of people. And when I'm interviewed, people always ask, how long does it take for you to get into drag? It's a constant question. And I figured out the reason they do that is because the ego mind, who wants to believe that this role that they've adopted is locked and is who I am, and that's what it is, and that's what I will be forever and ever, and nothing will change that. But I'm challenging that to say, you know what? Don't get it twisted, hon. It can change just like that. In fact, this idea that you're sitting over here and I'm sitting over here, even that is an illusion. The truth is, there's one of us here on this planet. We are all one thing. Your ego says we're separate, but the truth is we are one. And that's the role of the drag queen, is to remind the spirit that we are one. And these roles that we play are just illusion. So,
why is that so scary for people to think that we are one? Because especially on the right wing, anytime you talk about us being part of one planet or one world, how we have to think globally or whatever, they hate that.
Right.
Because they need to cling to this feeling of, no, we're America. We're number one.
That's right.
And fuck everybody else. And it's kind of like, okay, but we do have to live the neighborhood is the planet.
That's right.
So
they're fearful because we are in this thought virus that has gone on for a long time, but it's never been the way it is now. And the thought virus is born from the ego mind, right? So the ego is all about fear, and and power is all about fear. So the message being we're number one and we're America it's positioning ourselves as in the power position, and power is always reflected from fear, and fear is a byproduct of the ego. So it feels like more than ever, and you see it all over the papers and all over the world right now, a thought virus where everyone, I remember when cell phones came along and you'd be on the plane and someone would say, talking really loud, and everyone can hear it. And says, yeah, I'll be landing soon, or whatever the case may be, right? But it's like, bitch, there's a condenser mic here, and you can actually talk like this, and you don't have to. But it's like, talk about civility and civics. People only saw themselves. They weren't thinking of other people's peace of mind or their well-being. So that it was like all about me. I'm going to talk this loud thing. And you see it walking down the streets of New York or Paris, where people are walking the street, not looking where they're going. They're looking at their phones, and they're making sure that other people look out for them rather than them being a part of a civilization.
Well, it's kind of a weird form of narcissism. It's sort of a societal narcissism, which now leads me to think, here's part of the reason why we're where we're at with the narcissist in chief, that he's not alone. He didn't fall out of the sky. He was elected by tens of millions.
He is the representative of what we are.
What we become, certainly.
That's right.
Yeah, well, that's so true. I was flying this past week, and right behind me, the phone rings. They'd already told us to turn off the phones. He picks it up, and he goes through this whole thing, and he wants to know, I assume he was talking to his spouse, where is she? Who's she with? You're sure you're alone? It was this interrogation.
Yeah.
And it was so loud, and they had turned off all the fans and everything on the plane, so it was like really quiet.
Yeah.
And everybody, and I'm thinking, doesn't he know we're all listening to him?
That's right.
And he got off the phone, and I said to the guy sitting next to me, and I hadn't eaten all day, so I just grabbed some crappy crap airport food to bring on the plane. And I noticed as soon as I got on, it smelled like food. Mm-hmm. Like, why did I bring this odor onto the plane? Because everybody else is gonna have to smell this stinky stuff. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't help it. I just said to the guy next to me, I said, "Tell me honestly, which was worse, this guy on the phone, or this thing I'm about to eat?"
Yeah.
He laughed so hard. He said, "Don't people know?" I said, "No, I don't know. There's something that's happened to us that we're so oblivious to the fact that we are sharing space with other people."
Absolutely. And that, again, it goes in on a broader level, climate change and what we're doing that affects everyone else. So, I just think of it as a thought virus. And unfortunately, when you look at the history of humans on this planet, we learn things two different ways, intellectually or emotionally. Mom says, don't touch that stove, it's hot. Intellectually, you can listen to her and go, she's probably right. I know her. She's been around a long time, and she's probably right. Or emotionally, you could go over and touch the stove and then go, oh, I'll never do that again. So, unfortunately for humans on this planet, what is probably going to happen is we're going to touch that hot stove, and we're going to say, oh, I made a mistake. I'll never do that again. Or we can listen to what the elders, the scientists, learned people say and say, we can turn this around, hopefully, if we stop doing this. Chances are we won't do that. We'll probably touch the stove.
Wow.
Yeah. That's just what humans do.
Yeah.
I didn't make this stuff up.
No.
I just observe it and,
So how long does our species have at this point?
Well, I think we are careening toward a huge disaster. And listen, I hate saying that. I don't want to say that.
You're actually an optimistic person.
Absolutely.
As am I. Maybe people don't think that, but I wouldn't do what I do if I didn't believe.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
It would have some impact or effect. So coming from your optimistic place, you also have enough awareness to realize that we are careening.
Yes. We are careening toward a disaster, and that disaster is akin to touching a hot stove and waking somehow waking up, lifting our head from our smartphone, and also people from our generation. The idea of being connected to a screen like that, it just speaks of Big Brother. I mean, I grew up after the Cold War storyline, and so the idea of some other entity controlling my thoughts at all times.
Right.
It's like, don't you understand this? And actually, they don't. They are, people my age raised a bunch of kids because with sort of this therapy mind, this sort of psychological way of wanting to right the wrongs of their childhood. And they thought they could do that by not telling their children about the hideousness of this world. Don't forget, we're in a jungle. Life is like a jungle, and there are predators, and there is beauty in a jungle. There's everything, and your best defense is adaptability and intelligence and knowing about things. How is it that a human has reproductive ability at 12, but they don't know anything about sexuality or anything about using their own standard equipment, GPS system in their own body, in their consciousness, critical thinking, we were talking about it earlier. They don't know how to use it. It's because parents keep their children in the dark, not to save their children, but to save for the parent from experiencing the discomfort of talking about what life is. And they thought that they could give their kids a little extra innocence, just a little bit more than I had. I want my kid to have more than what I had. It's like, actually, you're doing them a disservice, and it's actually your own narcissism that is keeping you from educating this person. My mother didn't teach us French. We didn't get to go to Staten Island in summer. We didn't summer in Staten Island. All the knowledge is power in the jungle, right. I wouldn't want some outside force dictating to my kid through a cell phone or a smartphone what they should think.
Right. That's why now there's the story a couple months ago that the executives and the people who work in Silicon Valley are the most strict about limiting the amount of time their children can watch those screens, can look at the computer.
Yeah.
They now realize they who have invented this will not allow their own children to even own a device until a certain age. It's just, if anybody, I'll post it, the article. It's a stunning thing to read, but you're right. We grew up in a time where Big Brother, there was a screen in 1984 in everyone's home, and I think 1984 had to have been written before there were screens, right? I mean, Orwell wrote this in the 30s or 40s, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so he invented this concept of this, and the screen wasn't there for the people in your home to watch something, so much as it was for them to watch you through the screen. Now all of our new TVs have a little camera eye in there, which I've put a piece of black tape.
Me too.
Have you done that?
I've done it for years. Yeah.
I bought one of these Alexa things a couple years ago, and it's like the first time it starts talking to you, or it picks up a word you said, I'm like, whoa, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I unplugged that thing, and I didn't feed it to the dogs, but I'm basically it's a dangerous device, I think. But or am I just paranoid? I don't know. But there's a shift that's taken place that I don't think is for the better. But we grew up with that. We grew up with the Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah, and Soylent Green is people.
Yes,
and,
right.
This idea that people can use your innocence to their advantage. And you have to be conscious of that. And if you have to be conscious of that to survive. And that is seemingly lost right now.
But we backed away, you and I, from the careening because we don't want to we don't want to bring people down into this place of despair that they can't rise out of. But, I certainly have been feeling that it's too late in some weird sense.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't mean too late as in, well, let's just give up, but too late as in, I don't think we have the science or we don't know yet how to turn it around. And who's going to do that for us?
Right. Oh, I tell you, Michael, this is the solution, and it's not going to happen. But I have the solution.
Oh, good. Thank you.
The conversation has to go to understanding who we are and how our minds work, and it just goes right back to the ego. We have to understand the human behavior. We have to be able to see ourselves from outside of ourselves. That's the next level. They say space is the final frontier. No. Inner space is the final frontier. The final frontier is understanding that you are a construct, this body that you have, the way you think, every original thought you've ever had was actually programmed in there. But there is originality there, but it comes from your spirit. And that understanding those entities, your spirit, your mind, body, and spirit, how they work is the solution. And that's the next level of the human evolution.
How do we do that? How do we learn that?
Well, we do that through stillness. We do that through meditation and being conscious. It's consciousness. When I see people walking down the sidewalk with the phone, that's unconsciousness. That's why the prevalence of zombie movies over the past 20 years have quadrupled. You see so many. It's a parable of what we are today. We are zombies. And for all the reasons we talked about earlier, which is people are afraid to open their eyes. And I think in the movie The Matrix, he says, well, why? I feel like I'm seeing this for the first time. He says, it's true, you are, because you couldn't see the truth of what this is because it's so ugly and so horrific. Mm-hmm. And then that haunting image of all the people in pods to infinite rows and rows of people actually not living their lives. They're living their lives. What's the James Cameron movie? Avatars. Everybody's living their lives through Facebook or through Instagram in these fake lives. But inside, everyone is so fearful and dead. That's why that explains the opioid crisis. It explains all the addiction that we have. The solution is a connection to your mind, body, and spirit, and the awareness of those things. And that is the solution,
You started by, when you said this, that it's not going to happen, but here's the solution. Mm-hmm. But as you are explaining it to me, I'm just sitting here thinking, I want to take what you just said and let's try to figure out how to make this happen. I mean, I just don't want to give up. I don't want to end up in that animated film WALL-E, where everybody is now in a flying pod up because the Earth is uninhabitable. Yeah. So everybody has to live up in space in these pods, and nobody and nobody is taking care of themselves, and everybody's just in their lazy boy that has wheels on it, and just a sad friggin' existence. Mm-hmm. To avoid that, and to do what you just said, it's I don't want somebody to dig this podcast up 100 years from now and go, wow, these two guys were onto something.
Yeah.
Look, why couldn't they make this happen? Because the species essentially almost went extinct.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. This is not a new idea. This is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I didn't come up with this idea.
No, the Chinese probably thought of it 4,000 years ago. Yeah.
But it's I've always been a seeker, and I always wanted to see what's behind the curtain, what's under the hood, what's really there. And so, Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth, it's all mapped out there. And the solution is simple. Be here now. Know thyself. Be here now. I didn't come up with this stuff. This has been around and if you looked at Krishna and Buddha and Jesus, they all say the exact same thing. The bigger question is, what is the prevailing idea that always overrides that thought? Because you said it earlier, we intuitively are inquisitive and we are actually kind people, intrinsically kind people. What's the overriding influence that always takes precedence?
What is it?
It's fear.
It's
fear. And it's the ego is all about fear. And so the ego it's fear of ideas and thoughts, so it wants to put everything in a box so it can make heads or tails of it. It's like, okay, that's that. You're bad. You're good. Us against them. It's like, no. But the act of breathing right now, the solution right now is to breathe, laugh, and repeat. And the act of breathing and focusing on your breathing forces you to be right here, right now. It's very simple.
Right.
So, if you're walking down the street if you're walking down the street with your phone watching this, it's different with audio.
Listening to us right now.
No. It's different with audio.
It is different with audio.
Yeah.
That's why I don't film. People said you should film this and put it on YouTube, and we do put this on YouTube. But I just haven't wanted to have a camera here doing this because there's something about what is that about sound?
Well, with sound you can do your basic movements. You can walk. You can do that with sound. With visuals, it's connected to our equilibrium and
the eyes have to be fixed.
The eyes have to be fixed. That's the thing.
Locked. They have to go into lockdown.
That's right.
Whereas you can do the dishes, the laundry, drive the car, whatever, and sound can be everywhere. And most of the time, it's not distracting. If anything, it might be making you feel better listening to your favorite music or whatever. That's
right. So if you are looking at a screen, then you can't be in the now. I was walking over here, I was thinking, geez, Orson Bean lived 91 years, his whole life, to be run over by two cars in Venice last week. Orson Bean,
I didn't know that. Wow.
The actor and free spirit, 91. He didn't die of a heart attack, didn't die of old age. He died because he was run over by two cars.
Right.
And and then they don't know yet, but the chances are those two cars were not paying attention.
Right.
And they were probably looking at their phone or something.
Right.
Anyway, long story long, it's very simple. It's being in the now. The problem with that is that if people were in the now, the number one thing they would recognize immediately is their unhappiness. And that is why people don't do it. People don't stay in the now because they would ultimately realize how unhappy they are, and that they don't immediately have the solution to make themselves feel better.
Have you found yourself that way? Have you noticed that with yourself through your life where it used to be called, still is, wanting to stick your head in the sand because you really don't, if you really paid attention to what was going on in your life, it would be like incoming missiles coming at you, knowing that, why am I still at this job? It sucks, and I hate being here, and I'm miserable.
Yeah.
Or this relationship is wrong.
Yeah.
Why am I, after all these years, I'm still, just pick any subject like this. It's a very common thing amongst all of us that you start to, and you immediately, when you start to think that way, you shut it right out.
That's right.
You override it.
That's right. That's right. When I was 10 years old, I'm born in 1960. When I was 10 years old, I started smoking weed, and I smoked weed for almost 30 years, like wake and bake, and and other things too, booze and everything. But I got sober over 20 years ago. And, when I look back at it, it was my way of saying, and I'm a sweet, sensitive soul, as are you. People who are sweet, sensitive souls gravitate toward something to just get my mind off of it. Because we're seeing everything. It's like, I see dead people. I see this. I'm seeing what's behind the curtain. And that explains why our country right now is in an opioid crisis, and among other things. But
want the pain to go away.
Want the pain to go away. But there is a solution. And, but it takes a lot of guts to follow your heart. I think it's the most political thing you can do is to follow your heart. And I
agree with that.
Yeah.
That's very true. It's and it takes courage to do that. It sounds like a cliche, follow your heart. Oh, that's easy. No, actually, if you really stop to think about it, it's not.
Yeah.
Because if you really thought about following your heart, there would be voices attacking you from right and left.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my God, if you do that, you're going to be so messed up.
Yeah.
Your life is going to be you're going to be broke.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody's going to like you. All the stuff that just starts hitting us. It's why, one of the things about our species is that we can write.
Yeah.
We're all writers. We're all storytellers.
That's right.
And we all have the ability to do that. But it's anybody who's tried to write knows this feeling of as soon as you have that blank page, whether it's on the screen or whether you're still typing or whatever on paper, it's the most frightening moment. If you've tried to do this,
yes. Yeah.
I'm sure you have. I know you have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know you personally, but I know that as a creative person, at the moment you decide to create, you're like, oh, fuck, I don't know. Oh, no. Or right away, if you get one page done, this sucks so bad, and you want to run away from it.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more comfortable to be back where I was an hour ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think you're right that I don't think things will change politically. When I say that politically, I'm not talking about political parties or whatever. I'm just saying I don't think things will change until people get to that place where they're willing to follow their heart.
Yeah.
Because if they do, see, and then maybe this is my crazy optimism. I believe if most people, not all, most people followed their heart, they would not want to live in a society where if somebody gets sick, they can't see a doctor.
That's right.
They wouldn't want to live in a society where somebody is paid such a minimal wage, an oppressive wage, to where they can never get themselves out of the box that they're in and can't have an enjoyable life. Nobody, if you cared, if you had a heart, why would you want somebody else to suffer? And I think, I'm sad to say this, but we live in this society, in this country, where it's like the attitude amongst many people is, I got mine, you get yours.
Right.
I'll take care of mine, you take care of yours. Somebody here, my family gets sick, I'll take care of it. I'm not responsible for you. I'm not responsible for your family. I'm not, and it's just like, whoa. Yes, actually you are.
Yeah, because there's only one of us here. And if you get sick, I get sick.
That's right. I had a Canadian explain this to me years ago. I said, how is it you are really, I don't want to say you're us, but we are not, there's no wall between us,
right.
Canada and the U.S. At least you, watch our movies, our TV, all this. We don't watch much of your stuff. We have no idea that you have two languages of your country. But we think the capital of Canada is either Seattle or Buffalo. But it's real. But I had a Canadian explain this to me, that we really have this feeling that if millions of us are left behind, if millions of us are falling between the cracks because they've lost their job or whatever has happened, we all feel it. Mm-hmm. We all feel, first of all, just out of empathy we feel it, but secondly, out of our own self-preservation. We don't want to live in a society. We've seen what that looks like. It's called United States. Yeah. Where when you push people just so far to where they are truly have-nots, what people will do to survive, and how the collapse happens. And they've watched the collapse in Canada. Mm-hmm. They've watched it. It's not that they don't have their problems or their own their own collapse going on. But boy, they don't want to be us.
Right.
And that's why even their most conservative politicians support free universal health care.
Yeah.
Because they know the alternative to that is a higher fence and a higher wall around their home, a gated community, higher private police force for the neighborhood, all the things that happen in communities of upper middle class people.
That's right.
Country.
Yeah, because they say the old adage, I'm not my brother's keeper. Well, if you're not your brother's keeper, then make sure that you're, the probability of your brother's kids coming and kidnapping you and stealing things and making wreaking havoc is very high. But
I've always said too that this is how I try to, if I am stuck on a plane next to a conservative, I try to find some common ground, and I say, here's the thing. Here's why you should support doubling the minimum wage or making sure that people are paid well, because the chance of your neighbor, if your neighbor is earning $60,000 or $70,000, $80,000 a year, what are the chances that your neighbor is going to break into your house and steal your TV or steal anything from you? What is the chance that your neighbor is going to mug you if your neighbor is making $80,000 a year?
Right.
You want them to make
absolutely.
And if you're an employer, you want to pay people well. It's in your self-preservation benefit.
Yeah.
To do this. And I think in other countries, I think they have that sense of that. And I don't know what the hell is wrong with us. Why don't we go from the heart? Help me out with this, because I love this country and I love the people in it, and I am an American, and I have watched this my entire life, and I am sick and tired of it. And now I see the careening. I see how fast we are spinning.
Yes.
Toward our own demise.
Yeah.
And I want to do what you just said. I want us to all get focused, be here now.
Well, unfortunately, just like in recovery, a lot of drunks like myself had to hit rock bottom before we were willing to turn it around. And, when you get sick and tired of being sick and tired, that's when you'll try anything. And that's, unfortunately, usually how people recover. And our country needs to get into recovery. I mean, it's like, you can equate 45 like that boyfriend of a friend of yours, or you think, what does she see in that guy? Oh, he makes her feel, he gives her this false sense of security. He makes her feel like a woman. It's like, well, you are a woman. You need to feel like, you are a woman. Why do you not feel like one? It's like this weird thing. So where we are is we're in a place as a country that we have to hit rock bottom, like an alcoholic, to be able to rebuild and recover. Yeah.
We're not there yet.
We're not there yet.
So it's going to take another 4 years of Donald Trump.
Yeah, it will. It will take another 4 years.
I just the thought of that. I felt that throw up in your mouth.
Yes, the bile.
When I just felt that when I said that are we going to have 4 more years of this? And will it take that long until he destroys so much?
It absolutely will. But this is what we do in the meantime. We hold on to the things that are our biggest defense in this situation. It gives us an opportunity to strengthen our love, our joy, our love of colors and music and dance and joy, all the things that the ego mind does not have. And it forces us to strengthen our level of understanding what's real and what's real in this world. The ego is all about false. That's why drag is so important, because it underlines and circles all of the facade and the matrix. It says, look, none of that's real. Focus on what is real. What is real is love and kindness, joy, laughter, music, dancing. Yes, it's like Nero and the fiddle as Rome burns. But find that space in your stillness, in your meditation, in your being present. That is joy and sanctuary. So offers us an opportunity to strengthen those things, And yes, it'll be difficult. It will be difficult, but you and I cannot overlook the part we played in all of this. I can't specifically tell you what part you and I played in it, but since we are all one, we do play a part in that, and we have to take responsibility for that. But there is a solution, and it has to do in strengthening your relationship with your mind, body, and spirit.
How would I do on a RuPaul's Drag Race?
Well, it depends on how ambitious you are, because drag isn't about, oh, you're the prettiest one. It has to do with all things, your sense of humor, your ability to see outside the box.
Okay, I can do those too.
Yeah, and your sense of fun,
Okay.
We love the twist of a phrase. I always say sweet, sensitive souls gravitate toward the irreverent because the mundane just bores us to tears. I remember talking to my father years ago, and he'd be talking about some person in the neighborhood who's, they're working at the post office. They got good benefits over there. And I'd be like, oh my goodness. I'd be thinking to myself, I've been on Hollywood Squares. Hello. I was on Hollywood Squares. And you're talking about benefits of the post office? It's like, anyway, the mundane is like death to us sweet, sensitive souls. So, drag queens and people who think outside the box, like yourself, you're a drag queen. We gravitate toward interesting twists of phrase, portmanteaus. I love portmanteaus. My favorite word in the English language is a portmanteau. It's Mexicatessen. And now that I've said it, I'm going to be saying it over and over in my head because I love saying that word. Mexicatessen.
Yeah. That's a great word.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
And it makes me happy because it's clever and it's the way it blends together. And so drag is about blending things and seeing things not only as they are, but as they could be, and mashups. And that's why those Carol Burnett skits where she would parody, mommy Mildred Pierce. She had one called Mildred Fierce. Were always so much fun because it made fun and made fun of life, and it doesn't take life too seriously. And the same with Monty Python. Everything was up for grabs.
Right.
Everything,
right.
And I've said this for years. I'm not offended. The only things I'm offended by are extreme poverty and deliberate cruelty. After that, it's fair game. Bring it on. Deliberate cruelty and extreme poverty are the only things that offend me.
So about a decade or so ago, in the town I live in Michigan, I was giving a talk. I think one of my books had come out, but I lived there, and one of the people in the gay community was there and stood up during the Q&A and said, "Would I be willing to be this town is the cherry capital of the Midwest." It's called Traverse City, Michigan.
Oh, yes.
So they have the cherry parade every year, and they crown a cherry queen.
Yeah.
So the gay community had asked for a float and a space in the parade to do their own cherry queen, someone in drag.
Yeah.
And so the town allowed it. And this had been going on a few years, and they asked me if I would be the cherry queen in drag in the parade. I said, "Oh no, man, I can't do that." And they're like, "No, you have to do it." And in that moment, I just said yes. And so I did, but I had a beard at the time, and I didn't want to shave my beard. You can keep the beard. It's okay.
Sure, yeah.
You can be a bearded queen.
Yeah.
And so I did it, and it was. I don't know how to describe the experience. It was front page in the town paper the next day, big picture of me riding and doing my queen wave.
Yeah.
And also, as we drove past as the parade went past the Republican Party headquarters, they were there, and they all came out with these big super squirt guns.
Yeah.
Not guns, bazookas.
Yeah.
And just sprayed me with all this water. And then somebody had one, or somebody on the curb, not a Republican, threw me their machine gun of squirt gun. I started firing back, and as a cherry queen. And
Cherry Queen fights back. Was that the headline of the paper?
Yeah, it was pretty much it. That's what it looked like. And I don't know if 50 years from now when they do the American Masters piece on me on PBS.
Yes.
I hope they find the footage of that somewhere. But you're right. Your show and everything that you've done. And this is we haven't even touched any of this, and maybe that's for the better, because I've enjoyed this conversation about where we're at and what we need to do. But you're one of the people that have helped to bring us along. So basically, what I was going to say was, there's two things you and I know have in common. We have both done drag, even though I've only done it once, and against all my better judgment, it seemed at the time, but it was actually a great thing. And the second thing is that you and I have been named by Time magazine as one of the 100 most influential people in the world. And I know when I read that, when I saw my name in there, I thought, wow, the world's in bad shape. If I'm one of the 100 most influential people. But you helped to bring us all along. And you did it in a way that, as you said, somehow it got accepted through you. You were this portal through that matrix, because you were outside it. And you came in. You didn't have to come in to help us. You didn't have to go on mainstream cable TV or whatever. You could have just gone and lived your life.
Sure.
You have all these hits on all the Billboard Hot 100 dance charts, and people will go clubbing, know your music, and as an actor, and you could have just said to hell with everything else and just lived and enjoyed your life. But you chose, not to do that. And I think one of the saddest days in my, as an American, as part of my American history, in 2004, Karl Rove convinced Bush that the only way he's going to get reelected, because the war was already a year old and unpopular, we have to get ballot measures in states to make it illegal to marry a person of your own gender, to be in love with somebody of your gender. And they got 14 states to put this on the ballot, including Michigan and Ohio. And he won that election by one state, Ohio. And they all claim that he got that second term because the haters came out to make sure that LGBTQ people could not get married. And I thought, wow, what does it feel like to be the other tonight when that night happened? And I honestly thought, I don't know how you felt at the time, I thought, wow, that's the end of that. Gay, what they call gay marriage. That'll never happen. That'll never happen in my lifetime. The fact that it happened 11 years later, just 11 years, and just one president later, blew my mind. In the way that I remember, the way when we were raised in the Cold War, the Berlin Wall would never come down.
Right.
Nelson Mandela, president of South Africa, are you kidding me? He's going to die in prison. These crazy ass things happen that we all agree will never happen. And then it happens.
Yeah.
Just like that. And I thought, and they, after the Supreme Court, with the deciding vote, I believe, one of the Republicans, I believe the Chief Justice, if I'm stating this wrong, somebody can correct me, John Roberts, decided that the government has no business telling you who you're in love with and who you can spend your life with. And so the same people within this gay community in Traverse City asked me to perform what would be the first same-sex marriage. And we did it on the stage of my film festival with 600 people in the theater.
Wow.
It was a very cool thing, but so this is where some of the optimism comes from, that I have seen these changes
Yeah, the pendulum swings both ways, and it's interesting how extreme the pendulum swings both ways. But you know, and we've been around for a while. That's what was so disappointing about the whole election last time, was that it underlined how far we had come as a race of people on this planet. It's like we're still here. We're still dealing with racism or sexism or all this. We're still here. The next step on that level, that evolutionary ladder, has to be an understanding of what we are, what those elements are, how the psyche works, how the ego works, and being able to override that, being able to override the impulse to veg out in front of a television screen, being strong enough to be present, having the cojones to be right here, right now. That's the next step on the evolutional,
because
ladder.
we're not done yet.
No,
we're not anywhere near done.
No, we're a very primitive culture,
Yeah.
Michael. We are a very primitive culture. We still, believe in the boogeyman, and I believe in the boogeyman, but not the scary kind. It's
Right.
another thing. Is I know we're about to close out, but the thing is the fact that there aren't discos. In my day, you could go out dancing. There's no place to dance. There's no place to dance. That says everything you need to know about who we are as a race of people on this planet right now. You drive by bars or whatever, it would say cocktails, dancing. Now it just says cocktails. There's no dancing. Dancing is our connection to spirit. That's why you see the natives are dancing around a fire and a drum beat. It conjures up the spirit. We are not connected to the spirit, the source. And that is our problem.
Why have we stopped dancing?
We stopped dancing because it is our connection to the spirit. And if we are connected to the spirit, then we are connected to consciousness. We don't want to be conscious. That's why the heroin, the opioids, the oxycodone, I can't say that word.
Oxycontin.
Yeah. That's why that's there, because we don't want to be here right now. That's why that is. And we don't
But
want
I understand that. I don't want to be here right now.
Yeah, sure.
It's just what we're in an election year. I mean, what are we going to do? What are you going to do? I think there's been a good group of Democrats that have been on that stage. They say good things and all that, and people know who listen to this that know that I've been out on the road with Bernie and supporting him and all that. But there are other good candidates too, and I just think, but what are we going to do? How are we going to stop this madness?
That's a very good question. I don't really have the answer to that. I do know that through my sobriety, it's important to do an inventory on what's going on with me. And it's a way, same thing America has to do, is what's going on with me. What are the things that are not useful for me? And what are the things that I need to make space for in my consciousness to invite the divine to enter into my consciousness. And that's why I keep saying America needs to go into recovery, not literally, but in this way that through recovery, you learn to do an inventory. And as if you owned a shop, you clear old ideas, old merchandise off the shelves so you can make room for new merchandise. Those factories, we don't do that anymore. We have to, if you owned a store, you have to bring in new inventory that the consumer wants to buy. And as a performer, I'm in show business. I've been successful in show business for many, many years. I'm not just one thing. I do a lot of different things. And even if you're not in show business, you have to be able to do a lot of different things. So those old ideas, throw them out. It's not too late to bring in some new ideas. There's an awakening that has to happen, as with alcoholics who go into recovery. We as race of people are due for a mass awakening. That's what has to happen.
Right. I get that, what you just said, internally, the internal changes that have to take place. But externally, what is the action that we need to do? What do we need to do this year? Are you planning to do anything around this election? Are you supporting anybody or thinking of doing that, or are you waiting to see what happens? Or
I'm going to wait to see what happens. I'm hoping that the Democrats will come together. I was hoping, last year that they would come together and form a consortium that had a real plan, and one that would pick one candidate so it wasn't so dispersed, and say, okay, we're going to get behind this so we can get this cancer. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about this concept, because even if he was gone,
yes.
45,
yes.
this concept, this idea is more dangerous. This thing that he represents is more dangerous than him.
That's what I say on this podcast all the time. It's not just about getting rid of Trump. It's about getting rid of that which gave us Trump.
That's right.
Whatever that is in our American soul.
Yeah.
We need to look internally, and then we need to act externally to correct it so that we take care of each other.
That's right.
The two things that you do not stand for, the poverty
Yes.
that exists, tens of millions of Americans in poverty, including our children.
Yeah.
And what was the other one?
Deliberate cruelty.
Deliberate cruelty. Oh, geez, we have to listen to that every day.
Mm-hmm.
But so we have a gay man running for president, which is historic. Not enough is really said about that. He's doing well. Not enough has been said about that since Iowa, probably because Iowa's such a friggin' mess. But when did here we are. Not even 5 years since the Supreme Court, by the way, it just hit me that it's not Roberts, it was Anthony Kennedy.
Yes.
Roberts wrote the big dissent saying something to the effect in the dissent, who do we think we are? Thinking that we can let people of the same gender marry. It was Anthony Kennedy that was the swing vote.
Yeah.
But we're not even 5 years from that. And we have a gay man running for president, and not just running, he's like near the top of the polls. This has got to give you some.
Well, it actually, what?
It does for me, even though I'm not supporting him.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Years ago, and I know we're running out of time. Years ago in New York, when I came to New York in the 80s, everyone was going to the same club. It didn't matter, gay, straight, uptown, downtown, black, white, Puerto Rican, get male, female. Everybody was in one thing. We were all partying. We had a great time. As Giuliani got into power, and this was in concert with what his rise to power in the city, different groups were splintering off. And this was now this was a sort of a preppy bar, and this was a leather bar, and this was this bar, and it was. It echoed what was happening around the country. People were splintering off into what represented them. Everybody wasn't together. And the same politically right now. With the Democrats, this one represents me, that one represents that one. That kind of thing. I don't think in terms of that. I think of us as one thing, and I've never felt comfortable saying, I'm with the black guy, or I'm with the gay guy, or I'm with that. I see us all as one thing.
Right.
So, I want the person in the White House who has forward thinking, who has a way to bring us as a race of people on this planet to that next level of consciousness. And
so who is that?
I don't know. Right now the Democrats.
You vote in New York, right?
I vote in L.A.
You vote in L.A.
Yeah, I still live here.
So, okay, but Super Tuesday then is not that far away.
Yeah, right.
So you're going to be voting.
I'm going to be voting, but it's so diluted now that it feels like just a gesture, and I will vote, and I will. I don't know who yet, but it feels like a gesture. Because it's so diluted. I had hoped by now we had honed in on one ideal, one concept, and move that way.
Yeah, I had an idea last year. I offered to the Democrats, don't do the debates, do an arena tour.
I love it.
All right. You're going to have to say, start with 10 candidates or whatever. There's an arena tour, and they all come out together.
I love
at
it.
the beginning. And
like in Superman 2.
Yes, exactly. And there's music, and it's entertaining.
Yeah.
And each of the candidates, instead of having to talk in sound bites for, you have 30 seconds.
Yeah.
You know, how do we fix the economic 30 seconds? It's like, I said, just let them each talk for 15 minutes. Just come out and give their Clarence Darrow, Abraham Lincoln speech. And this is what I will do.
I love that idea.
Yeah, and I thought this was a good idea. And then they would all be there. They'd all be together on the stage, not to rip each other down, not to
right.
And this wasn't a crazy idea. Because I said, look, most, if not all, of the Democrats, and it turned out to be true, are going to support the same things. They believe women should be paid the same as men.
Yeah.
They believe the government shouldn't be in the bedroom.
Right.
They believe $7.25 an hour is insane.
Right.
Go down the whole list. They all agree on those basic things. They may have a different approach on how to get there.
Mm-hmm.
But if we did this as one big collective,
mm-hmm.
and yes, one will be the standard bearer,
mm-hmm.
and the other 9 will be foot soldiers in that person's in our army, not that person that's running for president.
Yeah.
And I'm just quoting too much of Bernie here at this point, saying that, but he really has this idea that you're not voting for him, you're voting for all of us, that we're all entering the White House together.
Uh-huh.
And so yes, more of that, more of this one, that we are one. This is how we will succeed. I hate to even use the word win, because I just think there's a corrective measure that needs to be taken, and it needs to be taken very, very soon.
That's right.
And we are here in an election year, and we can do that. So, but I appreciate your thoughts on this, and you still have a few more weeks, to decide. And
I will probably go with the strongest, the person who has the most momentum, because
who has the greatest chance to beat Trump.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it's simple. I don't have this idealistic idea of I don't want to throw my vote away. I don't. I want.
You don't want a symbolic vote.
No, I don't want to do that.
You want to charge someone with the orders.
That's right.
To go out there and lead us to a better place.
That's right. And this idea of us being so separate and splintered, it's insanity. It really is insanity. We can't get anywhere with. That's another thing about where we are. After World War II, we were, as humans on this, we were very clear on what our priorities were, and it wasn't. You calling me by the right pronoun, or it wasn't. Things. Our priorities were a better life for everyone. And it wasn't just splintered off into these different groups and subgroups in this group. It's like we're humans first. So I believe that that's where we need. And unfortunately, when we touch the stove,
right.
our priorities will immediately come into the proper order.
Hopefully quickly, because we're already sort of touching the stove.
Oh yeah,
and it's weird that our hand still hovers there.
Yeah,
that's well. I'm going to bet on the fact that most people, not all, but most people will get this, and hopefully not too late. Even though I feel it's too late right now. We're in an era that I call too late, but it is an era. And so it's not true. The end of the era hasn't happened yet. We are still talking here. New York is on fire, as we can hear
clearly
in the background.
Yeah,
and I love doing this here. People say, "Well, you should." It's a studio. No, it's not. This is my guest bedroom.
Yeah,
and now it's no longer a bedroom, and now I don't have anybody come see me anymore. But that's okay. I'm ready. I'm here in New York City. We're sitting on top of a movie theater, and I can't think of a better place to be. And I can't think of having a better guest that This has been, I could talk to you for 2 more hours, and maybe you'll come back sometime, but I think you've been such a force for good. You're funny. You bring happiness to people. You in your early days, and I think to just mentioning the fact that we don't have dance clubs anymore, you wanted us all to get up and dance when we were all dancing together. And I want those days to come back, and I think that they will. And I have a lot of faith in our young people too, that they'll put the screens down, because I've seen it already this year during the election out on the campaign trail. I've seen, man, the young people they're the energy of this thing.
Yeah.
And they're gonna make this happen. I really truly believe that. But RuPaul, it's been a real honor to have you. I'm in the first weeks of my podcast here.
Oh.
So and it's I'll look back and remember this day that you were here in this apartment talking to me. It means a lot. And keep doing what you're doing.
Thank you so much, Michael. It was a pleasure talking to you, and I've always loved what you do and how you are a soldier in for love and joy and honesty and equality, and I am honored by your presence.
Well, it means a lot to hear that. Thank you very much. We've been talking here with RuPaul, and you've been listening to Rumble with Michael Moore. Don't forget to subscribe. It's all free. And tell your friends and neighbors. Share this with them. There were some really important thoughts expressed here today. And I can't wait to go back and listen to this and think about it some more. You've really stimulated some great thoughts here. So thank you very much, RuPaul, for this.
Thank you.
That's it, everybody. Thank you for listening.